Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Fan Disaster. This is Battlefield 1, and in today's weapon review, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Lewis Gun Suppressive LMG, of course exclusively available to the support class in Battlefield 1. We're going to be covering the base stats, attributes of this weapon, as well as how it performs on the battlefield, how to best use it, and how it compares to some of the other LMGs in the LMG class. Starting off, as we always do, with the stats of the weapon in question. It's got a maximum damage of 23 here and a minimum damage of 15. A damage model comparable, for example, to something like the level 10 unlock for the support class, the Who at low weight. This means a 5-shot close quarter kill, a 6 and eventually 7-shot kill at longer ranges. For a matter of fact, to be precise here, you're going to be using 5 bullets to kill your target in the chest all the way out to 30 meters, from which point onwards you're going to require 6 bullets all the way up to 38 meters. From 39 meters onwards, you're going to require 7 bullets to down your target, which means, of course, an increasing time to kill at those ranges. The fire rate of the gun is on the lower end for the LMG category at 480 rounds per minute. Nevertheless, not the lowest, and certainly capable of dealing out a decent amount of damage nevertheless. It means, however, that you should maybe try and avoid too much close quarter combat, especially if you're going up against the assault class or some of the higher damaging LMGs such as the Matson MG or the Bar, because they will technically at least out damage you at those distances. The muzzle velocity shouldn't be in the way of shooting medium to long range targets, however, on this gun at 740 meters per second. It isn't the fastest in the LMG category, but it is nevertheless very solid. Another thing to note about this gun is, of course, its relatively large magazine size, and an interesting one there at 97 rounds that you have available to shoot through. Speaking then of this relatively large magazine, the reload times at 2.85 seconds for the short reload and 4.2 for the long reload are relatively comfortable, not too bad. You shouldn't find yourself reloading this gun too frequently anyway, certainly not engaging in a long reload process. There's no reason really why you should have to go through all 97 of your bullets before actually reloading this gun, so there's nothing to complain about reload times here. Moving on then to the recoil model of the Lewis. Now this is one of the strengths of the gun. It's certainly a low recoil gun with vertical recoil of 0.25 and horizontal to the left and right of 0.17, as well as a very low first shot recoil multiplier at 1.5. This gun is very stable, easy to use, and especially accommodating for those who have very poor recoil control. And another thing that we have to cover, of course, in weapon reviews is the accuracy of the weapon, and there's no real surprises here. It's got a base ADS of 0.21. It has an ADS while moving of 0.79, and when hip firing, at least according to the stats as they stand now, pre-patch and pre-DLC, it's got a hip fire while standing and moving at 2.5. DICE has, however, indicated that this should probably increase to roughly 2.75 post-DLC, post-weapon balance patch that's coming then. So by the time this video airs, likely the actual accuracy, hip fire accuracy of this gun should be at 2.75. A little worse. Nevertheless, not much really changes with this because, of course, whether or not you have a 2.5 or 2.75 hip fire, you're only going to be using that hip fire reliably in close quarters. At ranges beyond that, you're really just better aiming down sight. You're not using an SMG here, you're using an LMG. There's no surprises there. Having covered the base stats of the weapon in question, then let's move on to some more interesting aspects regarding playstyle and application, as well as why I personally, as of now at least, prefer the suppressive version of the Lewis gun, which is of course the one we're looking at in a little more detail today. The reason comes down to, frankly, iron sights. Some iron sights in Battlefield 1 are very good and allow you a good overview of what you're shooting at and what's around your target, making target tracking as well as making sure you don't get shot by whoever you're shooting at's friend a lot easier. The MG15 is a great example of it. The iron sights on that gun are fantastic. The same, sadly, cannot be said for the Lewis Gun Suppressive. Its iron sights come with a relatively large and obstructive housing that I, for my part, couldn't really get friendly and used to with, which is why I went over and used the suppressive, which has, of course, a proper scope. Now, the scope, while forcing you to have a little bit of a magnification on there, and this is where the low recoil of the gun comes in handy, does mean that you're more accurate, at least in theory, at longer ranges. That is to say, unless, of course, you find it very easy to use iron sights at longer ranges. It also means target tracking is relatively easy, but it does, to a certain extent, decrease the amount of situational awareness that you have, because there is, of course, a certain amount of screen blocked off by the housing of said optic. Having said that, let's move on then to how to best use this weapon. Now, it's not a close quarter weapon. It's certainly not an extreme long range weapon, and no automatic weapon in the game is thought really for extreme long range, at least as of now. So it's more of a medium range gun, but it's actually very capable at that role, as most LMGs are, they're relatively flexible. This one tends more towards the medium-long range because, of course, of its fire rate. Has somewhat of a problem with this, however, because it doesn't do as much damage at those ranges than something, for example, like the MG15, which only slips to a 6-shot kill. So ideally, you're using this gun really between 30 to 40 meters. That's obviously not always possible, however, and as such you find yourself requiring 7 bullets to kill your target sometimes, which is bad, but not the worst possible. And the low recoil, as well as the decent accuracy of the LMGs now as they currently stand, does make it relatively easy to actually hit those shots. I found the Lewis gun to be relatively flexible in its application and combat range because it has the automatic weapon advantage as well as a good optic, allowing you to be accurate even in close quarters, medium range close quarters, and has the ability to certainly damage targets at long range, if not even take them out. Now, how does this compare to something like the MG15? Well, the MG15 does more damage at range and does more damage at close quarters. It has a higher muzzle velocity and a higher magazine size. However, when you're using the MG15 Suppressive, for example, to compare apples with apples, your problem here is you're going to be dealing with a lot more recoil. Not necessarily much more vertical recoil, but the dreaded horizontal recoil, which is a lot harder to compensate for. Matter of fact, it's more or less impossible to actually account for the horizontal recoil, especially when it's, of course, equal on both sides. Furthermore, the MG15 has a higher first shot recoil multiplier. Now, would that mean now that the MG15 essentially is the more skilled gun to be used by those who can control recoil better, and the Lewis gun, because of its worse damage model, is more the gun for the people who can't control recoil as well? I don't really know. This comparison is an interesting one, and I may at a later date actually fully analyze these two weapons and try to figure out which of them is better. For now, what I can say, however, is the Lewis gun is a competent weapon. It's one you can use on the battlefield, and it's one you shouldn't feel yourself constantly being outclassed by your enemy's weapons. I have fun running around with it. It feels like when you're using this gun, you're very accurate, very precise, and you're not scared of engaging people at more or less all ranges. Of course, with the exception, or trying to avoid at least, the extreme close quarter and the extreme long range. Everything else really is within the strengths or the capabilities of the Lewis Gun Suppressive, and as such, it's an enjoyable gun to use, which allows you to somewhat switch off the part of your brain which is constantly worrying about whether or not you're close enough to whichever target you're about to engage to actually take them out. Something you find yourself doing frequently when you're using a number of the medic weapons or, of course, the assault weapons. With that being said, I'd like to know your experiences with the Lewis Gun Suppressive. Have you enjoyed this gun? Have you not? Do you use it on a regular basis? Do you not? Feel free to leave that, as well as, of course, your usual video suggestions down below in the comments. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you on the next Battlefield 1 video.